So you want to know if you can make $100,000 wholesaling real estate. That is what we're going to talk about in today's video. My name is Austin Zabak, and if you're brand new to my channel, I really appreciate you tuning in. I'm a real estate wholesaler. I've actually wholesaled roughly about 2,000 houses in my life. I'm also a flipper, I'm a real estate agent, and I'm just a real estate entrepreneur. So if you haven't already been to my channel, then I really appreciate you clicking on. But today we're gonna go ahead and talk about, can you actually make $100,000 wholesaling, right? So maybe you're in a different industry, maybe you work a 9-to-5 job, maybe you're a stay-at-home mom, whatever the case might be, for whatever reason you've been looking into wholesaling, right? And wholesaling is where, you don't have to be a real estate agent, right? You don't need a lot of money, you don't need good credit because you're not actually buying any real estate, right? You're not actually flipping any real estate, you're not doing anything like that. But instead what you're doing is you're marketing to a seller to get them to sell their house, okay? Somebody that, might have interest in selling for cash, and then you're locking up the property under contract, okay? And then you're turning around and you're flipping the contract to a cash buyer. Now, obviously you're dealing with people that need cash, okay? So you're creating a win-win scenario in the real estate industry, right? And I always say that because I think there's kind of a bad rap with wholesalers right now of, taking advantage of people or whatever the case is, and you don't want to do that, right? What you do want to do is you want to provide a solution in the marketplace, okay? So understand that, before we kind of dive into the video. So you're wondering, can you actually make $100,000? I mean, look, the short answer is yes, but stay to the end of the video because I'm going to explain a little bit more of what I mean and can anybody make $100,000, right? Can anybody do it? And there's a little bit more to it than that, okay? I really want to dive in to a couple of different things so by the end of the video, you feel confident of whether or not you actually want to get in to the wholesaling world. So the reality of it is, of course you can, right? Of course you can make $100,000, but how many people actually do, right? And obviously the answer to that question is not many. And I think one of the biggest reasons, just kind of diving right into it, is that most people, I think they don't know what they're doing, right? They get into the industry, unfortunately, and there's a lot of gurus out there, right? There's a lot of people that talk about how it's so easy, right? And you don't need credit and you don't need a lot of money and, anybody can do it. And while that is definitely true, I think it attracts the wrong type of people, right? You're obviously watching the video right now, and you've obviously heard about wholesaling before, and you probably heard about it from TikTok, from Instagram, from YouTube, or whatever the case is, and here you are. And what you want to keep in mind is there's people all over the country, maybe even all over the world, that they found out about it the same way that you did. But the issue with that is that the guru selling the course, and not all of them, okay, not all of them, but some of them that are selling the course, they make it look easy. And I will tell you that it is not easy, okay? Now, it is simple, but it is not easy. So there's a big difference between simple and easy, okay? So I want you to understand the difference, okay? So simple means, it's not that complicated, right? Once you figure it out, you can do it, okay? Anybody can do it. Easy, on the other hand, is it's a piece of cake, right? It's not gonna be very hard to do, right? And I think there's a big difference, and I think that we have to establish that first to actually figure out if you watching the video can actually make $100,000. Let's just do a little bit of simple math, okay? The average wholesale deal in America is roughly $10,000. Let's just say, for the sake of the video, that the average is $10,000. Now, a lot of big wholesalers might be like, Austin, our average is $18,000, or Austin, our average is $8,000, okay? I'm just gonna say, for the purpose of the video, the average is 10, okay? And honestly, it's probably pretty dang accurate, okay? So if the average is 10, then you've got to do 10 deals in one calendar year to make $100,000 in 1 year, okay? Now, again, for the purpose of the video, we're just going to assume that you don't have any overhead, right? So, if you close 10 deals, you make $10,000, you get to keep all 100, right? You get to keep the full 100 grand, okay? Now, obviously, you got to pay your partner, okay? If you didn't think you had a partner, you have a partner, okay? His name is Uncle Sam. You got to pay him. But that's obviously a topic for another video, right? So yeah, you can absolutely make 100 grand. You've got to do 10 deals. Now, in order to do 10 deals, you've got to do roughly a deal a month. Obviously not quite a deal a month, okay? But almost a deal a month. You might have a down month or a bad month, and that will kind of allow you a little bit of wiggle room, right? Now, you might also have a month where you do a deal that is 20 grand, okay? And you might have a month where you do a deal where you make 5 grand, right? So again, the average is roughly 10. The challenge is in the beginning, if you're solo, right? If you're trying to wholesale all by yourself, then what you need to understand is you are a marketer. You are the acquisition. You're the person who's going to actually have to pick up the phone and talk to the seller, right? And you know, negotiate and everything like that. You're a transaction coordinator, so you have to fill out the contract. You've got to, you know, manage that. You've got to get the contract opened with the title company or with the attorney. You've got to open escrow. You've got to deposit your earnest money. And then now you've got to actually sell the contract to a cash buyer, right? Which is what they call a disposition, okay? So you've got the acquisition of the deal, and then you have the disposition of the deal, which is where you take the contract and you sell it. And then now you've got to kind of manage everything, right? You've got to manage the seller. You've got to manage the buyer. You've got to do everything, right? So in the beginning, before you have any help or anything like that, the issue is once you do your marketing, right? Say you're driving for dollars, or you're door knocking, or you're cold calling, which by the way, I've got a bunch of links down in the description below, so definitely check that out. But the moment that you get a deal, you've got to pivot, right? I've got to pivot, and now I've got to negotiate. And then once I do that, I've got to pivot again, and I've got to sell the deal, right? So if you have to do that every month, you know, you've got to be very consistent, and you've got to be quick to kind of pivot back and forth, because once that deal sells, guess what? You got to go get another deal to make more money, right? And I think a lot of people forget that. They forget the fact that, you know, when you're a one-man band, remember, you make money when you're doing the marketing and when you're doing the acquisition, right? Like when you're acquiring a deal. You don't have anything to sell if you're not acquiring a deal to begin with, right? So you've got to remember, like, in order to make 100 grand, you've got to kind of be able to do everything if you're a brand new wholesaler. So obviously, once you make 100 grand, you know, you could afford to probably hire somebody, right? Even part-time, you could afford to hire somebody, or maybe a VA to make calls for you, or whatever the case might be, which we actually have a VA company. So if you're interested in that, definitely drop a comment down below. But you could probably hire a few people, right? And then it will be easier to make 100 grand again, right? And then maybe you could go from 100 grand to 200 grand. So understand that, you know, it takes time to make 100 grand, right? Like, you're probably not gonna make 100 grand right out of the gate. You know, for me, it took me 9 months to close my first deal, okay? 9 months. I mean, it didn't happen overnight, all right? So you have to understand that you've got to be patient with yourself if you want to make $100,000 wholesaling. I think the biggest thing you have to keep in mind is that if you decide to become a wholesaler, if you decide to get into the industry, you know, you've got to be in it for the long haul. I see too many people, they get into the industry and they quit, right? They get in, you know, they waste a little bit of money, they waste a little bit of time, and, you know, a few months go by and they throw in the towel, right? They're like, I'm done. This is an industry that you cannot give up on, right? And I don't think that you can give up in any industry, or even a job or whatever it might be. But, you know, this is an industry where it does take time, but once you get the ball rolling, like once you get the momentum, it does get easier over time, right? It will get easier, but it isn't easy, and it won't be easy starting out, but it will get easier, okay? So understand that, you know, understand you can make 100 grand doing anything, okay? You really can. I know that there's gonna be people that comment down below and they're like, Austin, you're full of crap, like you can't make 100 grand, right? Blah, blah, blah. Look, you can make 100 grand, okay? Like doing just about anything, you really can. I mean, you could flip junk on OfferUp, and if you flipped enough junk, you could make 100 grand, right? You could make 100 grand doing Turo. You could make 100 grand doing Amazon automation or Walmart automation. You could make 100 grand being a real estate agent, right? You could make 100 grand flipping Pokemon cards. I mean, just you can make 100 grand, right? Like you could trade Bitcoin every day. You could trade crypto, Ethereum. You could trade Forex. I mean, it is not that difficult to make 100 grand. Now, it's going to take time though, right? You know, so many people in today's society, I think, you know, they want it right now, right? Like you see social media, you see Instagram, and you think that you should have it right now, right? Because whoever you're following, you know, it appears that they got it overnight. And the reality of it is one of two things. Either there's like a decade of time that you're missing. You didn't see that person spend like a decade to get to where they're at. Or number two, they're faking it, okay? There is nobody you see on social media that became successful in a matter of 12 months or even a month or 6 months. It just takes time, right? Like my mentor said a long time ago, Austin, it takes 3 to 5 years at a minimum to become an overnight success, okay? 3 to 5 years at a minimum to become an overnight success. So just remember that it takes time, but in conclusion, you can make 100 grand wholesaling real estate, and you could even do it sooner than what I'm saying. But what I am saying is have the right expectation. Don't have such a high expectation that it's unmeetable, right? Like you can't possibly achieve what you're setting out to achieve, right? Have a realistic expectation in a relative amount of time that you're trying to achieve the goal, and you can do anything you put your mind to. I appreciate you for watching the video. If you haven't already, make sure to smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe if you haven't already. Drop a comment down below if you have any questions. I'm happy to make more content talking about wholesaling or being a real estate agent or whatever it is that you're interested in. I really appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.